People might think that we've made some ground, that we've gained some ground because the pay gap closed by 2 cents. Those women workers, many of whom were working in jobs that didn't provide them with paid leave, that didn't support them to be able to continue working during the pandemic. We're talking about women who got sick with COVID and had to leave the labor force. So that 57 cents, it doesn't actually represent gains. That 57 cents represents the fact that there are more than 1 million workers whose reality is not being accounted for. We all know that many women workers, including Latinas, are not working full-time. They're working in the gig economy. They're working part-time. They're working in jobs that sometimes pay under the table, so their information is not being reported. We know that the experiences of undocumented workers, they're experiences that aren't fully reflected in the data that exists. There are whole categories of women whose experiences are not reflected in the average. For me, that's really important for people to understand, because what this means is that when we think about this average 57 cents to $1 pay gap, that in many ways, it's a best case scenario. We've heard from individuals like a woman in Florida who was a single mom who was working in the fields. And when the pandemic struck and the schools closed and the daycares closed, she had no choice but to leave the workforce. It wasn't an option for her to take her children to work because the fields are not safe. And so not that long into the pandemic, she and her children became homeless because they didn't have resources to be able to pay for their rent. So we've heard from women workers loud and clear that they felt, and the reality is that they were really put in an impossible situation. We need to make sure that everyone around the country is picking up the phone or sending in a letter to tell their political leaders that we want change. So the impact of the pay gap is one that's consequences are far-reaching. It's not just something that's going to affect me as a Latina today and maybe over the course of the next 20 years of my career. It's something that my child will inherit. My child will inherit the consequences of me not being paid fairly.